I noticed my good friend Mick Taylor's on one of your records.
He is, and it's been a long ride, 52 years, but having Mick Taylor on one of my records was definitely one of the high points.
And you have something else in common with him. He's been on this show.
Fantastic. Where does he live now?
Mick lives in England,
Yeah.
and I only know because I work with Rob Fraboni, who produces Keith Richards and Stones, and we're friends of Mick's, and we're looking for him, and we found him through one of our guests, the sons of Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce have been on the show.
Uh-huh.
And they know Mick over there in England, so uh, there's a glimmer of hope we'll get to see Mick again because I think his wife keeps him under wraps in England.
I was just telling you, Joe, I met Mick briefly when I was signed to Columbia, and he had just left the Rolling Stones, and he was also signed to Columbia. And I was at the International Convention in London. I guess it was in '77, and I was introduced to him, and he was just, some of the solos he played with the Rolling Stones, Time Waits for No One, they were just fantastic. And I asked him if I wrote a song that suited his style, would he play on my album, which I planned on recording in London? And he agreed. So I went back to New York and I wrote this song called Rock Ballad just so he could play on it.
That's, he's a wonderful man. And to have him on your record, two really important musicians doing that, makes me happy.
Good.
I love your new album.
Thank
I
you,
just
man.
love it. How do
Thank
you do 52 albums?
Well, once upon a time, people like myself, we were called recording artists.
Right.
Proud Columbia recording artists. We were recording artists. And I think, like any artist, I think a painter keeps painting and a writer keeps writing. And I think this is my job. I'm supposed to keep making albums. And an album is kind of uh, it's how I express whatever it is I do. I'm old school, so the format of an album and trying to put together, 9 or 10 songs that fit together in some fashion uh, on that canvas of an album. That's what I'm still doing after all these years. I haven't changed.
Well, I'm really happy that you have so many recordings because remember the song Sunny by Bobby Hebb?
I was just thinking that song today.
You're kidding.
Honey, yesterday my life was filled with rain. Sunny, you smiled. Yeah.
Well, Bobby was one of my best friends,
Oh, man.
and I work for the estate. I'm the producer for Bobby's new releases. But
Ah,
my point is, with two songs that won Grammys, A Natural Man and Sunny, he got three albums out in his lifetime.
well.
Now, there's a lot of recorded albums, and I'm going to put them out. We have a box set, but I'm so grateful you got to put the 52 albums out because Bobby only got three.
Well, I've been very fortunate that every change in the music business and the way recorded music is distributed and gets to the ears of the fans has worked in my favor, really, even up to this point of Spotify. I've been an independent artist for a long time, and I'm so lucky that I started, when there was nothing but albums, LPs. And then came 8 tracks and cassettes and then eventually compact discs and each step of the way I've tried to be part of it and with Spotify today every day I can see how many people are listening to my new album Infinity, and I love that sense of intimacy with the audience that the internet has brought us.
It really is a remarkable change from 1976. Now, are you in Paris because of Patrick Mate?
Well, you knew Patrick, yes.
I was the first album artist he ever signed.
Oh
We
boy,
were label mates.
we were label mates, Joe. The New Rose, I used to call it was the orphanage for American artists who've been orphaned by the labels in America. But Patrick Mattei, as your listeners might or might not know, he had an independent label in France called New Rose. Had some great people on it. I think the Cramps were on it.
The Trogs.
The Trogs. And then he signed a totally unknown singer-songwriter from Texas named Calvin Russell, who became huge in France, just huge.
Really?
Yeah, huge. I mean, he saw him playing at a South by Southwest convention, signed him up. I had to write kind of a promo sheet explaining this kind of music, Texas singer-songwriters and kind of in line with Joe Ely or, Towns Van Zandt kind of thing. And then he became huge in France. I mean, he was selling a couple of 100,000 albums, which is a lot here, touring all over the place. He passed away. And then sadly, Patrick, who I used to have lunch with, once a month, he passed
Oh,
away.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Patrick came over to see me play at a little Italian restaurant, Cantone's, and Jonathan Richmond came in. He was a friend, and Jonathan's doing push-ups on the floor while I'm playing. And Patrick, you had to love it.
That sound, I think, Ernie Brooks, who was in the Modern Lovers with Jonathan, he was my bass player for many years, lived in
Oh,
Paris.
oh, wow.
And Jerry Harrison, who was in the Modern Lovers, he was in my band for a while. Then he left to join the Talking Heads and he produced one of my albums, Milwaukee, in 1985.
What was the demo that got the deal for Polygram?
The demo that got that deal, I recorded at a little studio in Port Washington. It was a five-song demo. I think Last of the Rock Stars was on there, White Middle Class Blues, a lot of the songs from my first that made it to my first album, Aqua Show. Most of those songs, Joe, were written in Europe. I came here in 1971, kind of with a just wanted to get out of America and see what the rest of the world. I started writing songs, playing on the streets. Most of those songs were written here, and here I am back living in France for 35 years.
Well, my next guest at 2 o'clock is a Mercury A&R man, Peter Lubin, who said, Elliot Murphy, one of the good guys.
Thank you immensely to Peter for that. And I say he's a fabled name in the music business as well.
Well, it was kind of weird. I get this email, and I want to talk about your new album, but from Peter, because I wrote about Whiteface on allmusic.com, the band. And I
Mhm.
wrote about them, Elliot, because no one had written about them. So I just decided, and he wrote me and said, thank you. And I said, be on my show. And he came on the show, and people liked it. So we're having him back today, right
Oh,
after
great.
you.
I will try and tune in.
It's well, it won't be on the air yet because we tape them, Dom edits them. So your show will be up maybe in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Well,
And
long before Peter was at Mercury, wasn't he at Mercury?
Mercury and Electra. Yeah.
Long before he was at Mercury, the head of A&R at Mercury, East Coast, was a guy named Paul Nelson. And Paul Nelson discovered me. Paul Nelson had gone to university with Bob Dylan. He was the one that Bob Dylan stole the Woody Guthrie albums out of his dorm room. He didn't hadn't heard Woody Guthrie before that. And Paul Nelson, I that demo you just mentioned, I knocked on Mercury's door, and back in those days, if there was an A&R man in, they would listen to your demo. And he listened to my demo, and he kind of became my mentor for a while. Although Mercury, he had just signed the New York Dolls to Mercury, so really no budget left for anybody else. So that's why I signed with Polydor.
But that's a great little story. So you recorded 5 songs and you knocked on the door.
Me and my brother Matthew Murphy, who he'd be a great one to have on your show. He's had a career as a tour manager as long as me as a singer-songwriter. He got all the CBGB's band, Talking Heads, Robert Gordon, B-52s, Eurythmics, and now he's worked with Steve Martin and Martin Short for the last 10 years, be,
Nice.
being their tour manager. But Matthew and I had both come back from Europe. And we put a band together in Garden City, Long Island, and we recorded this demo. And we just started knocking on doors on Broadway, literally, till we had some interest from Warner Brothers with Polydor. The head of A&R there was a guy named Peter Siegel, who had come from the village folk scene. He was in a band called the Even Dozen Jug Band with Maria Muldaur, a couple of others, but he signed me up right away, signed us up. And things happened so fast, Joe. That album was recorded, it came out, and then I had my face in Newsweek magazine, and it was like, whoa, what is happening?
That's amazing stuff. Let's hit infinity. Why the title Infinity?
That's interesting because I was just doing a an interview with someone who asked me the exact same question just an hour before. Infinity is always a concept that has always mesmerized me and terrified me. That there is no end to anything, there is no beginning. It's just all there all the time. And I guess that's the kind of way I'm looking at my career at this point. I said, I got tired of counting the number of albums I've done, so I just decided to call this one Infinity.
I never heard of anyone putting Roger Harris and Roger Maris together.
I should get it. I think there's a Grammy category for that. The most obscure names ever
What do
recorded.
they have in common?
These were just like iconic memories of my childhood. I mean, I remember
Ah,
when Roger Maris was hitting the home runs and breaking the record. I remember when Richard Harris, was getting strung up by his chest in a movie, some cowboy movie about the West. And I remember Gypsy Rose Lee too. She's mentioned in that song as well, the famous burlesque star.
well, who's Granny? Granny takes a trip.
Granny Takes a Trip was the name of a very hip clothing store in London in the
Oh,
60s,
oh,
where the Rolling Stones used to shop and the Beatles used to shop. And as I said before, when I was in Europe in 71, I went to London and I remember I bought a pair of like snakeskin boots. And I think wearing those boots probably had a lot to do with me getting in the door of Polydor Records too. So maybe I'm Granny.
ah, interesting. I mean, it's a delightful album, and you take twists and turns. Like Red Moon over Paris, inspired by being home.
Inspired, and last there's a moon they call a blood moon. For some reason, it takes on this reddish hue. And there was one last night in Paris. So uh, I live on the fifth floor, and I don't know if you've been to Paris, but it's not very tall. Buildings are about five, six, 7 stories. That's about it. My building is about 300 years old. No elevator, by the way. I got to walk up here to the fifth floor, but I have a unbelievably fantastic view of the whole city. And I often stare at that moon right out the window. And I guess I'm old school. I look whenever, the full moon seems to affect me when I look for some kind of portent of what's to come in the moon.
It's a wonderful intro, and then it just switches, and then you go back to the intro. It's almost like a chorus, I guess.
Yeah,
But I love it. It's very entertaining. Um, did you write these songs all in the same time period?
I did in a very short time period. My original goal was to write a song a day, and that just seemed that soon proved to be impossible. I think I did write three in a row, maybe Red Moon Over Paris being one of them. But all of these songs were written really in the last year, and then we started recording them, and then it all happened. This album came together very quickly with the help of my son, Gaspar, who's the producer, and he produced the album, and he has a studio, and he's like a multi-instrumentalist. So
Oh,
but we wanted to do something not so minimalist, but eclectic. I think it's one of my most eclectic albums. There's all different styles going on this album.
oh yeah, you go into rock at the end of the album. It's very nice. And the Bobby Hebb thing again. He was called the Song a Day Man in the '60s. He would write a song a day. So again, you're channeling Bobby, I think here.
I think I might be, yeah.
It's so
Did
how
he do
far
Treat Her Right?
I know the band.
Did Bobby Hebb do Treat Her Right as well, or
No,
was that okay? But he did Sunny.
he did Sonny. He did A Natural Man, which
Yeah,
was a Grammy for Lou Rawls back in
yeah,
1970.
yeah.
It's male vocal. But Bobby was amazing and an amazing guitarist. So he was a session man. So he was on Roscoe Shelton, and remember Dave Baby Cortez,
Yes.
Rinky Dink, right? The roller
Yeah,
skate song.
yeah, yeah.
So it's either Rinky Dink or
Did
another
he
one.
do the happy organ? Da, 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 da. Yeah.
If you listen to Rinky Dink, it's Bobby Hebb on guitar, and he's
Okay.
playing the Love Is Strange riff.
Mm.
Because when Mickey left for Paris, Mickey and Sylvia Robinson joined Bobby Hebb. It was Bobby and Sylvia. So when you hear Rinky Dink, you hear the Love Is Strange guitar because Bobby was playing it every night.
Wow.
It's pretty
No,
wild.
everything comes full circle. That song, Sonny, which you're so involved with in his career, that inspired me to write a song called Sonny.
Really?
I have a song called Sonny. It was on about 10 albums back. And then, yeah.
Oh, he would love that. Bobby was just so cool. But I work for the estate, so his daughter, I produce her. She's a marvelous writer and singer because her two parents taught her how to write, right? Um, but we're keeping the archives going, and we'll get back to Infinity, but like the Lion in Winter. Now that's I referenced the movies with that. Did the movies inspire you?
The movies to it, they've always inspired me. And when I was a kid, when the family would go out to the movies on Long Island, I was just talking about this with my brother. I remember when Lawrence of Arabia came out, and they did an actual intermission in the film, I think, because it was so long. And all the great musicals, Oklahoma, films like that. But The Lion in Winter was with Peter O'Toole, I believe. And it was kind of about a king getting old, and I guess I could relate to that. Not that I'm far from a king, but and I had a friend named Peter Beard who was a famous photographer, famous fashion photographer, and lived in Africa, a very Hemingway kind of character who passed away just a couple of years ago. And I think his death always stayed in my mind and kind of inspired me to write that song.
Yeah, Peter O'Toole was 1968.
Yeah.
Doug Kershaw, Fetch Me Water reminds me of Doug Kershaw, which again, you said the album has many genres.
Yeah. The great Cajun violinist. I'm not sure if he was from Louisiana, but he had that style.
Yeah, Rob Fraboni had produced him, and I had reviewed the record, and when I heard your song, it like, wow, it sounds like Doug.
Yeah, he was great. We were really in a golden age of music, huh, Joe?
We were, and it kind of unnerves me that people don't understand that it was a special time, you
It
know.
was a special time. It was a time, I think, when the music business, it was the artists and the producers who were really pushing the business. Then the business became more important than the artists at some point, and things turned around. But you can look back to charts back in those days, and like every song is a great song on the charts. Anyway, the glory that
That's
was Greece.
Patrick is such a hero, you know. I was his first A&R man, so he sent me over the Trogs and the Saints, and
Uh-huh.
I called up Ahmet Erdogan, and I said, A&R for New Rose, I want to play you some music, and he goes, the Trogs, Wild Thing. I said, yeah, we've got them. So he set up an A&R meeting with Richard Steinberg, but at least Patrick and I would, you know, going to the majors and trying to make it work at the very dawn of New Rose.
I kind of remember him telling me about that with Atlantic Records.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
went to Atlanta. So do you remember Marcy Drexler? She was at ASCAP and at Arista.
yes, I do.
So I
I do.
call up Marcy. We're in New York, Eric Brown and I, my guitarist, and I call up Marcy and I said, I am from New Rose and we got some stuff. I don't have time. I said, fine. Richard Steinberg's going to see me, and you're going to be out in the cold. See me at 10 and don't be late. And she was really hard, right? We go in there, and she's a lovely woman. She was just great. The phone rings. Excuse me, boys. What do you want? So she changed personas. She went to ASCAP, and then I stayed in touch with her, but she's gone now. But those are the days, the early days of New Rose. And I think ROIR cassettes, they were distributing Patrick.
I think so. And he had a wonderful relation with a Japanese label. And because of him, well, I've been to Japan 3 times. I first went there when I was on Columbia because my album Just Story from America there was a song on that album called Drive All Night, which was covered by a Japanese band called the Roosters, and they had a hit with it in Japan. But then I went over with Patrick to Japan with Chris Spedding playing.
Really?
Yeah, with Chris Spedding, and I think we did Kyoto, Tokyo, Kanazawa, the 3 or 4 different cities. And first we stayed in my mother's apartment in New York because we went Paris, New York, and then to Tokyo. And I made the fatal error. Patrick said, "Do you mind if I smoke in the apartment?" And he smoked these terrible little cigars. I don't know if you remember that. They were never out of his mouth. And man, I got bronchitis after spending a day with him and his cigars.
He stayed at my home in Woburn, but I don't remember the cigars. It was very early in the New Rose, like around 1982, 83.
Yeah.
Because do you know Willie Loco Alexander?
Oh, I know him well. I mean, I know of him well. He did a song about Jack Kerouac,
Right.
and he
And so
did
I,
Mass Ave.
yes. So
Yeah.
I was his manager and I signed him to New Rose
Okay.
in the early days. And then we signed Johnny Thunders.
I knew Johnny Thunders well too because I was with Lieber and Krebs in New York.
Oh,
Uh,
were you? Wow.
Yeah, I opened for the Dolls quite a few times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my dear friend David Johansen just passed away.
I know. David cornered me at a party. You've got to clean up Johnny. And David wouldn't let me go. He's got me in a corner. You must clean up Johnny because he knew I signed him to New Rose. And it was just great to be with David because I love the Dolls. Yeah.
Patrick told me that Johnny Thunders, you get your royalties every 6 months from the label, and Johnny would show up on the dot every 6 months on that day and want to get paid in cash.
Well, what he did was when we did the signing and we got the advance, when it was time for the royalty check, Johnny flew to Paris, threw himself on the floor like he was having a cold turkey, and Patrick gave him the money and wouldn't give it to the manager, which was, my cut was gone, and
Yeah,
whatever, it was Johnny. But
they did. I did a lot of shows with Johnny too over here because he was kind of living in Paris for a
yeah, I
while.
think he moved
Yeah,
because of New Rose.
yeah, he moved because of, and he was in a film here too. But the French love beautiful losers, and that's kind of what Johnny Thunders was.
But Patrick did create really a major independent, I'd say, because he
Yeah,
had so many great acts. Play New Rose for me, the box set.
yeah. He had Alex Chilton from the Box Tops, the Saints. Uh, there was yeah. I think that box set was there was a 3-day New Rose Festival in the Kremlin Bicêtre, which is a suburb of Paris, which is where the offices were. And everyone played there. I played there, and Calvin Russell, I mentioned before, everyone was there. And it was French. It wasn't English, you know. We were that rare group of American artists who we found an audience in France bigger than we did in England, which was very rare because usually it worked the other way around.
Sure. But he had his finger on the pulse. I think Patrick was involved in the music industry before he started the two labels.
He did, and he went to the most prestigious business school, HEC,
Oh,
there
really?
in near Paris. So he knew the numbers too. He could count the numbers. And then he worked for RCA, and then he started New Rose. And I did, I don't know how many albums with him on New Rose. And then that turned into Last Call,
Right.
which is his second label, which is also the name of one of my songs. He said he named it after that. And we were together for, I must have done 20 albums with Patrick.
It was actually the third label because the first one was Flamingo out
That's
of
right.
Bucks. And so Flamingo was distributed by Carrere
The
with
by career, exactly.
Phyllis Nelson. Yeah. So, storied career he had. We have to do a tribute to him someday. How
There,
did
you know, there've been some talk about making a film, a documentary. There was a couple of exhibitions, photo exhibitions about Patrick, but
really?
he deserves more acclaim.
So, how did you meet my dear friend Ann Layton?
Anne used to write, I think for was it called? It was either Circus or Zoo Story. Does those sound familiar?
Circus does, sure.
Yeah, maybe there was Zoo Story. But I did an interview with Anne back in the 70s, I think, or early 80s. I think it might have been at the time of my first independent album, which was called Affairs. And I did an interview with Anne. And then many years later, she was kind of managing a singer-songwriter named Jan Close.
Oh, yeah, I know Jan.
Yeah. And she got in touch with me and she thought we could do a tour together in America. And she put it together. And that's what happened. So, and then we've staged every time I put out an album, she's my contact in America. And she does a great job of spreading the word. And I've some amazing things have happened with Ann. I did a show at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. because of that Ann Layton put together.
Now, my friend Jeff introduced me to her at a radio convention in New York. And Ann and I are sitting across from each other. And I'm friends with Mark Fowler from Grand Funk.
Oh
And
yeah.
she was handling Grand Funk, the other band, with Don Brewer and Mel Shasher. So Ann's like, well, I handle Grand Funk. I said, well, I'm friends with Mark Fowler. We thing going. And we didn't hit it off the first meeting, but now she's a very dear close friend. But it was just funny how we met and that little interplay,
That's
Fowler.
a band. They were so huge at the time. Grand Funk Railroad. And I love that song of theirs, American. We're an American band.
Yeah. All night with Freddie King.
Yeah.
I saw Freddie King open for them way back when.
I was also so fortunate that I opened shows for almost all the great blues guys who are all gone now. I mean, I did Buddy Guy a couple of times. I did a tour of France with Albert King. Opened for John Lee Hooker in New York. Muddy Waters. I mean, James Cotton. And the funny thing is, Joe, those guys back then, we thought they were so old.
Right.
They were in their 50s.
Right.
We thought they were so old to still be out doing it. And here I am. I just turned 76. And I'm going to next weekend. I go to Spain to play 3 shows. So,
I had lunch with Buddy when he was 50.
mm,
We were working on his album. I still have these unreleased Buddy Guy Masters we did in 1986
ah,
album right before Damn Right I Got the Blues. And the major labels, they offered 15 grand, Columbia Records, 15. And Buddy wouldn't take it, and he shouldn't have.
no, no.
Yeah, that was crazy. And then um, I called up an A&R man and I said, Nick, and I said, what's wrong with these people? He said, greed. They want Fleetwood Mac. They want Cyndi Lauper. They don't care. But nowadays, they'd kill for the 50,000 records Buddy would have sold back then.
I would hope so. At some point, the music business became very short-sighted. It was just instant. They didn't really care about catalog anymore. I mean, back in my day, a label would sign you. I had a 4 album deal with RCA. They didn't expect you to break on the first album. There was a thing called artist development.
Right.
Doesn't really exist. So they really allowed you to develop and to get your show together, and improve your chops. But now you gotta to get signed to a major. I think you already gotta have like 1 million followers
It's true. Uh,
on Instagram.
So you're going to Spain?
Spain is, in fact, one of my best countries, and I love the Spanish audience. They are just fantastic. I'm going to do two sold out shows in Madrid the weekend after this one. There's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, I like to think it's because Spain is was the home of the guitar. You know, that's where the guitar came from. So my good music has always been very guitar oriented. But I first went to Spain in 1983, and you know, when Franco was the dictator, rock and roll was illegal. They wouldn't allow Beatles music there. So by me going there, Franco died, I think, in 76 or 77. So I was like the first wave of rock and roll music to come to Spain along with a couple of others. So I've been touring there continuously, and the Spanish audiences are they're remarkable.
So how do you put Infinity in with all the other music you have in a live show?
That is tough. That said, that I got to work out between each show because you know there's something I want to play some of the classics that people are expecting me to play. You know, Last of the Rock Stars, Drive All Night, things like that. And I want to play some new stuff too. So as of the shows we did last week, we did I think 5 songs off the new album.
That's healthy.
I got a very good band here. Been with the same guitar player for 29 years. His name is Olivier Duron, and he played with a legendary French rock and roller named Little Bob. I don't know if you ever heard that name.
Oh,
And I have a violinist from Australia. Been playing with her for 8 years. My percussionist. So it's a four-piece band, and literally I can say learn this song, and by the next night we can do it.
nice. Do they do Diamonds by the Yard?
We of course do Diamonds by the Yard. Yeah. Yeah.
I was listening this morning again to it.
That was the night. Oh, I want to show you something. I don't know if you know, in Japan, they do these amazing CDs that are like albums. And
No,
someone
that's
just sent me
amazing.
this. This is Nightlights.
Right.
And they make a CD, but in the exact same package like it was as an album with a fold out with all the words. There's the out. It looks like an album. Someone just sent me 3 of these that have come out in Japan of my stuff. But yeah, we do Diamonds by the Yard. And this photo, by the way, was taken on Times Square before they cleaned it up and kind of turned it into Disneyland. You know, you can see the porno theaters are behind me there. Whether you can see read the marquee, it says every inch a lady. Use your imagination.
That's wild.
It's been a long trip.
It is. So that's incredible. Do you record your shows live with all the audience doing the cameras? Do you make sure you get a cassette or something?
I have a couple of fans who come to nearly every show, and they have some pretty sophisticated recording devices. So we get every show recorded. And I really want to put out a live album again because it's been a while. But the one thing I don't like is to have to listen back to all my shows. So I'm trying to talk my guitar player Olivier into doing that. But these days everything gets recorded one way or another, you know. Sometimes the quality is not what you want, but I'm lucky that these 3 fans of mine, they kind of vie for who's going to plug into the soundboard, you know. And we get some good recordings.
Well, I love your website because it's very clean and you can click on at the top, which I love. It's got to be like easy access. And
Exactly.
remember John Pousette Dart
Oh
from
yeah, I did a show with them
really?
somewhere, sometime. Yeah, that
John's
name.
going to be on the show again. He's been on 3 times and he has a website where he puts the music up and like the live shows. So you
Yeah,
could like for fans put a live show up and say, "Tell me which song you like best." So you don't have to listen. They do.
good. The
And,
name of his band was just called Pusat Dart, though, wasn't it?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Pousette Dart.
I don't know where I played. Maybe it was the University of Massachusetts, somewhere like that.
He's amazing. He's just amazing. And again, he had the one and a half hits on Capitol, and you know how it was. Like you said, artist development. Where is it?
Yeah.
But years later, he's still touring. And what I like
Uh,
about the website that he has that resource, you can hear his old tunes and the live shows. And to me, that's like, wow, you know, and maybe you don't have to do listening. Yes.
I'm gonna try that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, look at
Perseverance
that
is the
Knights.
answer.
Hmm?
I said perseverance is the, I always say the success in the music business is survival.
Look at Poussette Dart's site and you'll see how he catalogs his old music.
I will.
But yours is so nice and clean. I wouldn't want you to clutter it either because I like that ability to just click on it and see.
My site, my webmaster, so to speak, is a guy named Steve Wilkeson, he's a music biz veteran who moved to France. He lives in the south of France, and he also does the website for Janice Ian. She is a really good site too, because she is such a faithful fan base, but he really keeps it up to date and easy access.
Genesis is amazing because I love those early. I think Shadow Morton did her first albums, and then she
Shadow did them, yeah, and they were recorded right next to where I grew up in Hempstead, Long Island.
really,
There was a studio there, and that was where Shadow Morton, I think he did the Vanilla Fudge there, and he did Jazz Society's Child.
yeah,
He
he
did,
was great.
did the New York Dolls.
Yeah, that's right. I almost forgot. So I've got the Wikipedia page in front of me, and it was like, I think they got like 30 albums for you. That's where I got the idea of like, wow, maybe it should be corrected.
Are they missing some or
Well, you know how Wikipedia is. Anyone, any fan can go on and change it.
yeah,
So you're at the mercy of fans who might not know. Um, but I love that you work with Paul Rothschild.
I did, yeah. I was signed to Lou Reed brought me to RCA. I was did my first album on Polydor, but Polydor was like a new label in America. And Aquashow was just getting incredible critical response, but their distribution was really still not set up. So Lou brought me to RCA. Lou was supposed to produce my first album on RCA, but then Lou got busted for drugs and he was kind of out of it for a while. So I went out to LA. I said, well, let's go with Paul Rothschild, who of course produced The Doors.
And
And
Janis Joplin.
interesting to note, at that time, The Doors weren't very popular. They were kind of looked at as an artifact of the 60s. It wasn't really till after the film came out that Oliver Stone did. So I worked with Paul Rothschild and we did Lost Generation.
Do you remember Jimmy Miller, the producer?
I never met Jimmy Miller, but I certainly know who he is. Yeah.
He was the producer of the Johnny Thunders album for New Rose. And what I said to the manager was, okay, he's my favorite producer. I got to meet him. And 3 weeks later, I became his manager. So we're at the Chateau Marmont, and I had Paul Rothschild's phone number. I said, I love Rothschild. You got to put him on the phone with me because Jimmy knew him. So I just got to say hi to Paul, even though I've interviewed all the Doors except for Jim, of course. Um, just talking to Paul was just really cool. And you
Mhm.
got to be in the studio with him.
Oh, for a long time, I lived at the Beverly Hills Hotel while we were doing that album. And it was just an incredible band Paul put together for that album. Richard T, who had played with Paul Simon, Sonny Landreth, the great guitarist Paul had brought him up from Louisiana. And I wanted Jim Gordon on
Ah,
drums because Jim Gordon from Derek and the Dominoes, who co-wrote Layla, who was just the best drummer I ever played with. But it's such a tragic story after that.
yeah.
Say he was schizophrenic, killed his mother, spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric hospital.
Uh, how was it like with Rothschild in the studio? Compare him to other people you've worked with. What was the vibe like?
I would say Paul was a very organic producer in that the whole band played together at the same time. I mean, there were
Ah,
minimum overdubs, and I would be singing the songs too while we were recording. And then, maybe some solos or some keyboards and stuff was. And he was very methodical. He'd been doing it so long. I mean, he produced the Paul Butterfield's first album, and he definitely had a system. And he worked with an engineer named Fritz Richman, who he had been with for a long time. And him and the head of A&R at RCA really started butting heads, and I got caught in the middle of that. The head of A&R at RCA was a guy named Mike Berniker. Nice guy, but he had produced Barbra Streisand, People, and he thought every solo artist should start an album with a ballad. And I wanted to start with a rocker, but we started with a ballad. And but yeah, Paul was just very professional. And like I said, the Doors were not that everyone had forgotten about them, as hard as that is to believe. So I think Paul was trying to reestablish himself. He was also working with Bonnie Raitt. She did a great version of Runaway by Del Shannon.
yep.
Uh, and Paul had an amazing house in Laurel Canyon, in the fabled Laurel Canyon there. And he showed me he had built the house, and he had a place where it looked like it was solid wood wall where he had put in secret compartments to hide his stash
Ah,
because he was busted for like a joint when on the New Jersey Turnpike right when the first Paul Butterfield album was coming out. I think he spent 6 months in some local prison because of that. But yeah,
oh. So Fritz Merchman was playing Passim with John Sebastian.
right. Yeah.
Was there with my camera. So I asked Fritz if he'd do an interview. I got like 20, 30 minutes with Fritz.
He passed away, I think, didn't he?
Did.
Yeah. My
But
early career was all around those guys. Peter Siegel was in the Even Dozen Jug Band. He produced my first album. The Even Dozen Jug Band's first album was produced by Paul Rothchild. In the Even Dozen Jug Band was Steve Katz, who later went on to produce Lou Reed and was in Blues Project and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Steve Katz produced my third album. So that kind of the New York Greenwich Village folk scene was very supportive of me, those veterans of that scene.
and they all had something to contribute.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing, Elliot,
Yeah.
that you got these different. I mean, like you said, it's a long road, but it's amazing. Mick Taylor, Fritz Richmond, all these people involved in making of the music. It is 1:46, so we got a few more minutes.
Okay.
Your Wikipedia page is nice. It's pretty decent, and it gives people a little capsule of what you've done.
Now, the American one or the English one, I can kind of keep tabs on. But I also have one in Spanish and German and five or six other languages. I have no idea if those are accurate or not. I mean, the French one I can read. That seems pretty accurate. But I mean, I think I have one in Russian, in Arabic, and all kinds of and everything.
What's a typical day for you in Paris before you go back on the tour?
Well, Joe, I try every day to pick up the guitar. I try to keep my voice in shape because I think that's the biggest challenge as you grow older as a singer is to keep your voice strong, and it is a muscle.
Hmm.
Back in the 80s, my brother was tour managing the Eurythmics, and Annie Lennox turned me on to a vocal coach in New York named Marty Lawrence. And I used to go see him, and he would let me tape the vocal exercises, which I found again a couple of years ago. And my son put them in digital format. So I try and do those vocal exercises every day. I do that. I almost go to the gym every day, work out, because I tell you, if you're not in shape, you can't stay on the road. So
Can't
those,
stay on stage.
and I really do enjoy Paris. I'm still, you know, it's still a thrill for me to be here, even though I've been here for 35 years. I just love it. It's a great city to walk around in. And usually I have plenty of things to do. Just getting together the logistics of the shows that are coming up, the recordings I'm doing, a lot of interviews, interesting with interesting people like yourself. So it's kind of you can I don't know if I'm in the victory lap stage of my career, but or the museum era, but it manages to keep me pretty busy.
Well, like you said, infinity, um, not future, not past, but like in the now. And you're absolutely in the now. And it'd be nice if radio would play albums like Infinity. But again, radio is another lost horizon, I guess.
Another love, boy, what wasn't it so important to us back in the day? I remember when my first people always ask me, when did it really get real? And I said, it gets real the first time you hear one of your songs on the radio. And I remember I heard WNEW and I don't know which DJ it was at that time, Scott Munier, played Last of the Rock Stars. And whoa, I knew my life would never be the same.
It is a thrill. Here we've got John Garabedian, who's a radio legend. He discovered Maggie May, Rod Stewart,
Mm,
and believe it or not, You Let Up My Life by Debbie Boone. It was his station that launched it, right? So Bob Bidner had this memory station here. We played 40s, 50s, and 70s music. And Bob passed away last April.
mm.
So Garabedian buys it, and it is so much fun because he's playing the entire spectrum. There's no station like it. You'll hear Sugar Time, that old 50s tune, and then you'll hear just anything. He just plays all sorts of stuff. Bee Gees, Stones, and it's a remarkable radio station. And again,
I
it's
think
independent. And
I think
the
for our
independent,
generation also, we appreciate that our scope is so much wider. I love listening to Frank Sinatra now, you know. Wasn't so into him back in the 70s and it's anything Elvis did, I will listen to now. One of my greatest regrets is that he rarely played New York and could have jumped on a plane and seen him perform in like Columbus, Ohio or something, but I missed that. But yeah, we were in the golden age.
Elvis's last Rhode Island show I saw, and then he died 3 months later. And he looked tired at 42, whatever he was.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
looked very tired on stage,
yeah.
going through the motions, and it was sad. Because to me, it was the end of Elvis at 42.
I was we didn't know then. I mean, now you look at Mick Jagger on stage, the way he's
Yeah.
moved in his 80s. Bob Dylan is still doing it. Uh, I remember a couple of years ago, my brother was tour managing Blondie, and I was up in Brussels. I was also doing a show, and we were staying in the same hotel. And in the morning, we all found ourselves in the gym. And I'm looking around at Clem Burke, the drummer from Blondie, and I said, 10 years ago, we would have still been up in somebody's room drinking and doing drugs. And now we're down here working out, after breakfast. Things have changed.
We got a couple of minutes left. What's the gyms like in Paris?
The gyms,
Yeah.
well, they've caught on now. I mean, I think it's become such a worldwide phenomenon, but I've been into it. I've been going to gyms my whole life, just about. I really changed my life about in 1985. I stopped drinking, I stopped everything else. And I remember when I first joined a gym in Paris, when I moved here, they asked me, so how many times a month do you think you'll be coming to the gym? Two, three, four? I said, every day, if I'm here. But it's really caught on. And yeah, that's kind of part of my routine. I got a gym I go to that's 10 minutes walk.
Oh,
I
good.
come back. My wife, who's a marvelous actress, is also a great French cook. And so I got it pretty good over here.
I love the painting behind you.
Which one is that?
That colorful one right behind you with the G.
That is actually a poster from the Montreux Jazz Festival. Yeah.
Whoa.
And I played the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1983. And I had David Johansen as my special guest, in fact.
What did you sing together?
We sang together. We sang the song Heart of Gold of
Neil
his.
Young?
No, he has it's called You Call Me a Whore, but I Got a Heart of Gold.
Oh,
And then there was also a song we wrote together called Having So Much Fun. That was on one of his solo albums, and it was two or three songs.
well, our time is almost up, as the Oracle would say in the Matrix. My request is to have on your website some live shows so I can hear them.
Okay,
So
Joe. I will
Spain
try and
can
make
come
that
to me.
happen.
Huh?
I will try and make that happen.
That'd be fun. Elliot, I so appreciate your time. This was a lot of fun.
It's been great talking to you, Joe. Let's do it again
All
sometime.
right.
All right, man.
Anytime. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.